Hi, and welcome to this episode of Our Guest Is, presented by My East Coast Experience Media in partnership with RBC. I'm Natalie Fournier. Our Guest Is introduces us to a resilient group of people, typically called immigrants, but perhaps better described as entrepreneurs, community builders, and survivors. In each episode, we'll be hearing all about their journeys to Canada's East Coast in their own words. Today, our guest is Christine Eruokwu. Hi, Christine. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Natalie, and thanks for having me.
So you're originally from Nigeria, and you moved to St. John in New Brunswick as an international student, and you earned your MBA from the University of New Brunswick. Christine launched her own business, Kaima Designs. Am I saying that correctly? Kaima? Kaima, thank you. Christine launched her own business, Kaima Designs, in 2017 and also co-founded United Colors of Fashion. She sits on the board of 3 nonprofits in St. John and is a mentor for international students. Christine was recognized as well as one of the most inspiring immigrants in Atlantic Canada in 2023. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Natalie.
So, Christine, I guess we'll get started for you telling us about your journey to Atlantic Canada.
All right. Well, that was like how many years ago now? So I think my journey to Canada all began in 2014 when I got my admission to study the MBA program at University of New Brunswick. And then I came down here alone, and my husband and my 3 daughters joined me afterwards. And we've since made St. John our home. Mm. It's been an interesting journey because, well, one of the first things we realized is like education in Canada is far different from what we had back home. You know, here it's more practical. And most times we tell people that one of the essential part of education here is that you're made to do presentations in almost every class. Mm. However, back home, it's different. We take our time. Usually presentations are usually at the end of the session, end of the class. So again, it was a new environment, new learning opportunity, and one big opportunity to change the trajectory of my career. And so it was an interesting journey coming down here.
And as you said, you came to St. John to study. What was that transition like for you, coming from West Africa to Eastern Canada, totally different sides of the world, but then also just being, a new Canadian, someone new to the St. John area and to Canada?
To respond to that, I just want to use this story. I don't know if you remember, I think everyone would. So the Snowmageddon in 2014. So prior to coming to Canada, I had never seen snow, and I was like, wow, I just want to see snow. Mm-hmm. And then God heard my prayers, and then that was the year, excuse me, that was the year we had this Snowmageddon when in 2014, it snowed like it hadn't in over 50 years.
Oh.
And after...
That's a nice introduction. Here you go, Christine.
Yeah. Exactly. I was like, so it's like after the first week when I was like, okay, well, I think I get it now. I've seen snow. I've seen more than enough. It's like I saw more than I bargained for. And so having lived here 7-8 years after, when people tell me like, oh, what do you think about the snow in Canada? I was like, so I've seen the worst of them all. And so I'm not even scared anymore, but I'm still not used to the winter. I don't think I'll ever be used to the snow.
Yeah.
But, so besides that, so when it comes to the living in St. John and all that, I think what really made the transition a lot easier was like anyone who knows St. John knows that it's a very warm, welcoming city. People are just generally nice and welcoming. So you come into a place, people are very quick to respond to questions. And I remember, I still remember, walking down the streets, looking up the signs, looking for, and people would just walk up to me like, how may I help you? Wow. Where are you going? And I'm just like, well, I'm trying, and I'll just show them. I always have the addresses on my telephone setup, so I didn't have Wi-Fi on my phone. I didn't have my data on my phone. So I couldn't use the GPS, right? So I always had the address. I'm like, okay, just follow this direction and things like that. So it was really a struggle, until I got my phone. And that's one of my biggest challenges when I came to Canada. I found out that there are many things that were really like great, but when it comes to telephone service, I must say it's just not as great as we have it back home in Africa. And I don't say that, without not because my husband used to work with one of the telecoms company back home, but telecoms in Africa is different. You want a phone line, you walk into a store, you get it today, right now. You didn't have to go home and wait for anything. Mm-hmm. Then it was difficult if you didn't have a local ID. I mean, like I tried to get a phone line. It took me about 2 weeks to get a phone line.
Wow.
As an international student, because every time I had to go with appointment, I had to go to, and then my classes, it was during the orientation period. My classes, I didn't really have the time to go to, then it was like McAllister Mall to go get it because it was the orientation period, like back-to-back classes and stuff like that. So every time I wanted to, there was always something coming up. I was trying to sort myself with accommodation, so it was just crazy. So I couldn't really settle. And then usually I had to wait until I got home at night when I would use my Wi-Fi to be able to connect with my family. And then the time zone, which was about 3-4 hours difference, then didn't even help. So by the time I was getting home, they already asleep. So it was a big struggle for me adapting within the first 2-3 weeks. But overall, it paid off.
So you literally were disconnected, really. I mean, you had
That's
no
the word,
phone.
yes.
And then with the time difference and trying to just connect with your family and say, just a simple, hey, I'm okay, or how's it going? I miss you. That must have been pretty tough.
Yeah, it was.
And you're definitely not the first person to complain about Canadian cell phones, let me tell you. What is going on? Why can't we, have more competition and to know that and if it still is like this, because that was only, 2014, 2017, if it hasn't really changed, maybe we're doing a disservice. The telecommunications companies are doing a disservice to immigrants, to people who are moving here to feel more connected and have that transition be as easy as possible.
Yeah, that's true, because even at then it was even a lot. It was far cheaper for my families to call me from Nigeria,
Wow.
Or Ivory Coast, than me calling them. I couldn't even afford to call them.
Yeah,
but they could call it then. So, and that's why for most international students, we're super grateful to apps like WhatsApp and Facebook Messengers, because those are lifesavers.
Yeah. Your business, Kaima Designs, is an African-inspired clothing brand. And I guess people who are listening, watching this podcast can't see, but I know you're wearing a hoodie from your shop. I noticed. It's very beautiful.
That's right.
And you've got the stacks of clothes behind you there. When you started your business, what did you hope it would bring to the St. John community?
Thank you very much. I get that question all the time. And so what I would say, I would answer that in two ways. So the first one was when I graduated from the program, from the Masters of Business Administration. I thought to myself that it would be a great disservice to myself if I had a business program and never had a business, to put everything I learned to practice. That was on one side. And then secondly, when I came for the program, I loved to wear a lot of my African print designs, right? And people would ask me, well, that's beautiful, but, well, we can't get them around here. I was like, yeah, well, I got this from home. And just like most African students do that, we have colorful blazers and stuff like that we'll always love to showcase. And so when I finished the program, I wanted to, so because of the feedback and the comments, that I got from my outfit, and I decided that if I wanted to do a business, it had to be one that would help me share my African heritage, something that would help promote my story. Yeah, because like everyone has a story. And then I was looking for an outlet to share my own African story without, and then to do it differently. And so that was one of the reasons I did. But above all, prior to coming to Canada, I had a chance encounter, with the nonprofits that I had worked with back home in Nigeria. And during one of our outreach programs, we had gone to a school and donated school uniforms to a school. It was like in a priority neighborhood. And so after the donation, there was this particular guy, I can't forget her face, She always looked very sad, very disturbed and all that. But for the first time in the 2 months that we're in the school, I saw her smile after she received the uniform. I'm like, I never thought I could see the day she would smile. But when I saw the impact that the school uniform and the school sandals, as we call them, made on her, I decided this is something I will do if I ever start a business of my own. So when I decided to launch Kaima Designs, I wanted to launch a business that had a purpose, not just a business. And so with that, when Kaima Designs was created, I had to incorporate in the model the uniform campaign project. So for every outfit that is sold, $50 and above, a girl in West Africa gets a school uniform. And so that's part of the business model. So as long as Kaima Designs is in existence, as long as we're selling items, $50 and above, then a girl is guaranteed to get a school uniform. Because if I could create that impact just on one girl's face, then many other girls like her in that situation who could benefit from that and whose lives could just, sometimes it's not the big things that make the big difference. Sometimes very little things make huge impact in people's lives. And so when I found out something as little as uniform, could make such a huge impact in a girl's life, I knew it was something I wanted to do. And so during the pandemic, most businesses were impacted, and of course mine wasn't an exception. So I had wanted to, at some point, when you have those conversations with yourself, like, I just have to, it's time to shut the doors, because my supply chain was greatly impacted. I had my designs, but every time I send them back home to my seamstress in Nigeria to create them and all that, getting them back was an issue, because now the costs were like, crazy.
Yeah.
And then the time, and, I was like, what, I can't do this anymore. Plus I had a full-time job. And so I decided to, end the business. But I couldn't sleep at night because I just kept seeing the girl's face, which was, her face was a symbol of the girls who needed that service. And so I couldn't sleep. Every time I thought about it, I was like, so if I had to end this business, then many, many girls in the situations would have to either be without uniforms, be forced to drop out of school. So I couldn't bear that. And I had to just like reinvent the business in a way that I had to produce my, I had to continue the business by producing them locally. And then I wanted to do it in a smart way as well, in a way that it could impact my community and my community in Africa as well. And so what I did was to create the cheddar hoodie, and that turned things around. And so I wanted to work with a partner who was active in the community. And so the partner that created the design is also a non-profit that supports the employment of Canadians living with disabilities. So here, this is a business that is supporting their own vision and mission, and then this is a business that is supporting a purpose back home for me. So it's a win-win situation when I look at it, and that's one of the reasons I decided to stay put in it. And with the cheddar hoodie design, everything changed. And then someone asked me one day, is there a story to the designs? I was like, yes. So because Kaima Designs is an African-inspired brand, every design had to be like African inspired, but they all have to tell stories. Again, remember, the whole idea was telling my story about my heritage. And so if you look at this, you'll see dots on them. So each of the dots represents unique individuals. So we're all unique individuals. However, we're connected in the community, irrespective of our race, gender, or our backgrounds. And we're all, so we live in an interdependent society where we depend on one another for our own success. And so that was the pandemic story. So I wanted it to be remarkable. So because the pandemic taught us that, isolation is not a good thing. And then the best way to get through trying times was by depending on other people, in a way where we helped. We had to help and support one another to make the most of our lives, I think. And that's the cheddar story. And when you think about cheddar, what it means is remember. So every time you wear this brand, it just helps to remind the wearer, or the ambassador, as I call my clients, because they're ambassadors to what's into the cheddar hoodie, but ambassadors. So every time you wear this, you remember that you're doing something for a good cause. You are supporting a cause because you have the power to make changes. So we don't have to, again, it doesn't take big things to make changes. And so every time I ask people, I said, if you had $50 to pick a hoodie, would you buy a hoodie that's just like, you wear it and it just fulfills the
from the mall
confidence look? Or do you buy one that's, in addition to what it gives to you, the feeling of beauty, it serves a purpose. And so for me, that's one of the ways I've been able to promote what we do with Kaima Designs.
And it's supporting a purpose locally to the people of New
That's
Brunswick and
locally,
internationally for $50.
exactly.
That's pretty acceptable. That's especially nowadays where things are just getting more and more expensive. If you can, just put your $50 for your budget for clothing that month towards something that is local and supports good things, and I think it makes you feel good inside. When you were talking about the uniforms for girls, can you tell us a little bit about what a difference a uniform makes for a girl?
Okay. So if you're familiar with the British education system, they wear uniforms to school. And so Nigeria being one of them, we adopt the British curriculum. And so what it means, like, we wear uniforms to school. In some cases, children without uniforms are not allowed in school because you're not prepared to be in school, because that's how you identify students from non-students, right? However, in some communities, due to poverty, some of the parents are not able to afford the uniforms for their children, especially for the girl child, right? Where priorities are placed more on the boy child because they continue with the family legacy, the lineage, and stuff like that. So the girls are like, well, why do we make this investment if she's going to be married off someday to a man? So she's another man's property. Although some of these things are changing in some regions and quarters, but not as fast as most people would want them to. And again, without a uniform, a girl's confidence, could truly be very shattered. And so you're looking at someone who has an opportunity to excel, to succeed in school, but because of that gap, they will never be able to fulfill their full potential. So we want to be able, so the difference here is we just want to make that difference so that we just want to reduce. So the way I put it sometimes, like through this program or through this campaign, we want to reduce the amount of dropouts in schools and then increase the amount of children or girl children that remain in school and graduate until they decide what they want to do with their lives.
You co-founded United Colors of Fashion, which I mentioned earlier, a nonprofit with a mission to bring diverse fashion, creation, and style to St. John. Can you tell us more about UCOF and how it benefits the immigrant and BIPOC communities?
Absolutely. So, again, as an immigrant, one of my passions is supporting other immigrants. And so at the time, United Colors of Fashion was co-founded with my friend Rufina Jali. I was teaching as a link instructor with YMC at that time. And so I had clients who I wanted to help in ways that I couldn't. So I was to just be their instructor, right? But every time when they came to class, they were not coming with their full selves. What that meant was they were always coming with with issues that we couldn't resolve in the classroom. So, for example, sometimes they wanted jobs, they wanted to do other things, they were feeling frustrated. Some of them were going through some sort of mental health issues, but that was not something that the academic portion would fulfill. And so every time I went home, I just kept thinking, how can I help? How can I make a difference in addition to the academic component that we're providing for them in the classroom? And so what happened was, like, their male counterparts would always get other jobs, maybe like become taxi drivers. They could become, they could be in the food industry, like, do skip the dishes and all of that. But the women couldn't do that because, again, for obvious reasons, there were some barriers they couldn't. So most of them had kids to take care of at home after work hours. They were really, really in situations where they couldn't. And it really affected their self-confidence. And so I just kept thinking, okay, what could I do with the experience that I'd had? And so I spoke to Rufina and I said, Rufina, I think we needed to do something with this. And then she was like, what were you thinking of? I'm like, okay, what if we had something like a sewing hub where these women would learn how to sew, and then when they get the skills and then the confidence, there's something about confidence. Once you've learned to do something, it gives you the confidence to accomplish other things you've set yourself, right? Or to accomplish other goals. And so we decided to start that off, but we didn't want to just be a sewing hub. We wanted a platform for them to also be able to showcase the designs at a fashion show.
Neat.
And so these were not things that were available, because if you want them to create, there must be an end to it. So when we're done sewing, what do we do? How will people know what we created? Right. And so we decided to create United Colors of Fashion. So those students were some of the first clients we had. And then there were some of them that they were amazed at their own results, and they were like, the usual, like, oh, teacher, it's like, to me, it's like, oh, teacher, thank you so much, because for them, they saw that they could actually get other skills by not changing anything really about their lives, so it wasn't about the system, me, sometimes it was just the opportunities. So what UCOF taught Rufina and I was that most times immigrants are just looking for opportunities to showcase their skills. We're not always looking for the jobs, or always looking for handouts, right? Or welfare. Most times people get depressed when they have all the skills, but they have nowhere to apply them. And it becomes a source of depression or other social issues that begin to affect them. Because what we found out was it helped them improve their language skills, because we had people from different backgrounds, different cultures, who came together to learn every Saturday. And then the instructor was a Canadian, and so she spoke to them in English. So they were improving their language skills, they were improving their social skills. And so during the COVID, when people were isolated, they were not as isolated, because now they had a community of learners supporting one another. And so it was truly a very successful one. So we're supposed to have, it was to be a pilot program. And so we're supposed to have it for, I think, 6 months or so. But at the end of 6 months, the ladies wanted to continue, so we had to leave it open indefinitely. And so, like, every Saturdays when they're available, they all go there to continue to sew and connect with themselves.
That's amazing. And you had mentioned too, not only your work with UCOF and co-founding that, but that you were an instructor at the YMCA. You're also a newcomer women leadership program coordinator with Prude Inc. I love that name, by the way. Can you tell us about Prude Inc.? And I did a little research too, at least with the Facebook page, and of course, not knowing what Prude Inc. is. And I just thought it was like really interesting, going back to teaching people how to sew and building that confidence. Prude Inc. is, the latest post on Facebook was do's and don'ts of renting an apartment. I mean, who doesn't need that, right? Like you're really starting from basic information sharing. Can you tell us a little about Prude Inc. and why it's an important organization for you to be involved in?
Very well. So, as I like to put it, when I'm not working at Prude, I'm working on Kaima Designs and UCOF. So now what that means is, like, Prude is like my full time. My work at Prude is my full time job, and what it is basically. So when you hear Prude, it means pride, race, unity, and dignity through education. So it's a non-profit that's been existent for over 41 years.
Wow.
And what we do basically is to help our clients overcome barriers. So it could be barriers to education, barriers to opportunities, whatever that could mean. So at the core of what we do is education and consulting. So excuse me, we provide opportunities for newcomers to learn more about cross-cultural workplaces and possible occupations. So whether it's skills that have to do with their language, whether they're learning to understand workplace culture, whether they're trying to understand the community in which they live. We also provide education or training for diversity, equity, and inclusion for organizations who are looking to provide that services to their clients. Because again, over the last 2-3 years, there's been this huge focus on DEI and now belonging, which is an addition to it. So Prude is a trusted advisor to the government of New Brunswick when it comes to DEI. And we work with both newcomers and Canadian-born or Canadian organizations. So at the core of what we do, we just try to help clients overcome barriers. And so my role at Prude, what it does for me basically is I help newcomer women particularly, with leadership training opportunities. So it's a 6-week training program where we provide resources to the community, resources in terms of human. So sometimes when newcomers come into the community, they're looking for mentors, they're looking for friends, they're looking for that connection more than anything else. So through the program, we provide all of those needed resources and then continue to help them build their confidence in whatever it is they're doing. We see very highly skilled newcomers coming every day in St. John, but there's always a gap from where they are to where they want to be. So through Prud Inc., we help bridge those gaps, and we do that through guest speaker approach. So we get members of the communities to be part of our guest speakers who come in to empower the women, and then sometimes some of them walk out of the program having mentors through those guest speakers who come in. So by the time they're done with the program, some of them are getting the kind of jobs that they want. Sometimes you see people who actually change their careers completely because now they thought they wanted to be in HR, for example, but through the program and seeing other people, and then they kind of like, oh, I think I want to do things differently. And then they begin to pursue a new course. Sometimes some of them just choose to go back to school. So it's really an interesting leadership program for newcomer women because at the end of the day, it just helps them. It gives them that opportunity to improve their confidence to pursue the career or the life that they really want for themselves.
And you are a mentor, I mean, not only to adults, but also students and international students, right? Which I guess they're adults too. So you're helping people settle into the region, into Atlantic Canada when they're done school. You're encouraging them to stay in this region. In your opinion, why is it important for international students to stay in Atlantic Canada?
Before I came to Canada, when I mentioned to people that I was going to St. John, you'd be like, where is that on the map?
Yeah.
Right? People knew Toronto, Vancouver, and the big cities, but not as much when it came to New Brunswick, St. John. And then we came to St. John and we saw the beauty, the nature, the people. And then why not? Why not let other people see the potential and the beauty in the region, in the city? And so, being an international student, I told you, I had my challenges. But I was able to navigate those challenges because of the support I received from those who were before me, and then the community in which I lived in. And so, having lived here since my graduation, the only way I could give back to the community that has supported me was to mentor other international students so that at the end of the study, should they choose to stay here, I want to be able to be there for them to help them so that together we can continue to improve the quality of life for everyone here as well as those who would come in future. And so I find it a privilege, honestly, that I get to be someone who is helping other people stay in a city where students used to graduate and leave because there were no jobs.
Yeah.
So now through the programs that we run at Prude and through our partnership with other nonprofit organizations, we're providing resources for newcomers to come in and then while they're job hunting, providing resources that would help them explore different options so that at the end of the day, even if they choose to leave, they know they have all the right information and not leaving and like wishing, oh, well, this is not in St. John or this doesn't happen in the province or anything like that. But now we want to provide all of those resources and continue to support them because it's not easy to travel thousands of miles to come to a place and then you leave after making, like I put it, such huge investment. As you know, most international students don't study with student loans. They pay everything, which they usually through their savings.
And it costs more,
Or
right?
loan.
It would cost
Exactly.
more yeah.
More upfront because unlike here, in Canada where you have access to student loans, we don't have that. And so if you want your investment to count, you want to be able to stay in that city, at least reap the benefits, get a return on your investment before you leave if you must. And so sometimes helping them explore, most of them actually choose to stay by because then it's hard to leave a place where you call home, where you already build a community of supporters and friends and, allies, as I choose to call it.
Is there something you think that the government here could do to encourage, make it easier for international students to stay in Atlantic Canada?
Well, First of all, I must say that a lot has been done in the last 6, 7 years, because at the time I came in here, we had no access to a lot of resources that international students have today. For example, today international students have access to some entrepreneurship programs that we didn't have access to when we came in. Then, if you didn't have your PR, you wouldn't do anything. But today, even with just study permits, work permit, people have access to some of this. So I think the government is already doing some things. And then, but one thing they could do more is to continue to support, because, the word support can never be overemphasized. So I know people always have challenges at different levels. So as more students come in, the challenges continue to grow. So one of the best things, like, always reach out to find out what these needs are, and then through agencies like Prude and Connection Works here in St. John, we provide resources, but funding could be an issue. So continued funding is a major one, because when the funds are there, when the resources are there, it's easier for them to get to have the resources they need when they need it. So funding will be I know most times it's always funding, but beyond that.
I don't want to throw you a curveball with this next one, but as a mentor, is there a certain situation, a certain person, you mentored, whether it was a student or an adult, that stands out for you?
Let me think for a second. Okay, yes.
Okay.
So one of the ladies I mentored, she had graduated from the university, from the same MBA program. She's from China. At the time she joined the Women Leadership Program at Prod Inc., her confidence level was, at its lowest. And when she joined the program, she wasn't sure what to expect. At the end of 6 weeks, I was amazed at the outcome. You know, she had ideas. She had interest in being. She was interested in being, in the home care industry. She wanted to pursue a career in sales, but she didn't know how to put all of those together.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of our mentorship program, she walked out with a clear idea that you could achieve anything, but you just have to do them in stages and in different phases of your life, right? And so within the first 2 years, she got a job as a salesperson, and then in 6 months, she changed jobs, so she got better.
Wow.
She just kept improving on herself,
Yeah.
and she never took no for an answer. Just 4 days ago, I was called to be in attendance at an event that she had registered. So she had registered at an entrepreneurship program at the Connection Works, and then she pitched her idea. I was blown away. So now her idea has something to do with providing support for seniors and other people who would need help with child minding or care for pets and all that.
Wow.
And I was super proud when I saw her. And so what that meant to me was like I said earlier on, most times we just need opportunities. So this lady's case is an example of someone who has the fire in her, someone who is determined to excel, but she just needed the right guidance and support. And so I have no doubt in my heart that in the next 1 year, she's going to grow exponentially, that I can't even recognize her when I see her on the road. And so she remains one of my biggest, my biggest achievements, if I would put that, as a mentor, because now it shows that indeed investing in other people does have its rewards, not just for the mentees, but even for the mentors. Because now what it does is, if I wanted to turn down the opportunity again, it will be turning down an opportunity to help someone be the best version of themselves, which is a mantra that I live by through the work that I do every day.
Tell us a little about your childhood growing up in Nigeria. And, was there a moment when you thought, I think I need to move away? I think I need to do something else here. Did that ever occur to you when you were growing up?
Not at all. So my childhood was one check out with different experiences. So I had lost my father when I was 7. And so growing up with my mom, so she was, I think it was just three of us then, myself and my two younger brothers, and then my mom, and then my uncle, who had been my late father's favorite cousin,
Hmm.
stepped in and he became like a foster dad to us. So he practically raised me. My values, my principles, everything I would say that I knew growing up as a child, having a value system that I can still pass on to my kids today, I learned from him, and he's someone I respected a lot. Like, unfortunately, he passed away when, I think, just before I graduated from the university. And so my childhood was one that, coming from an entrepreneurial background, my father was an entrepreneur, my mom was an entrepreneur. So everything was all about entrepreneurship. And so it's not surprising that I am an entrepreneur in some ways today as well, right? But now, still going back to the childhood, growing up, I loved my I loved my childhood in spite of all the challenges. And then by the time I got to university, and then I still wanted to stay back home in Nigeria. But again, marriage brings a different trajectory and a turning
Hmm.
point in your life. And so when I got married to my husband, I decided to move to Canada. It wasn't something that initially I wasn't so keen on moving, but
Okay.
he thought it was best. And surprisingly, it was he was at the peak of his career as the CTO, that's Chief Technology Officer of a telecoms company in Ivory Coast. We lived in Ivory Coast at that time, but he was willing to give up everything, to bring the kids over, so that we would have a new future for them here. Because again, our country, you know, just like every other country, has its own challenges,
Hmm.
and everyone is always looking for better opportunities for children and all that. So at the time we came here, it was just so that they would have a better childhood that we didn't have, But then growing up, it was okay, it was perfect. Of course, kids, what do we know? When you grow up and find that some things that used to be like, fun, happiness, are not exactly what they are. So when you live in an area of insecurity and all that, and then you can't, you're not sure about what the next day would be or the next month will bring. Living a life in an environment filled with so much uncertainty isn't something like a lot of people could handle. And so we wanted something with more certainty. And so that was one of the reasons we chose to come to Atlantic Canada in the first place. And so when I compare my children's childhood and that of mine, by all means, I prefer the childhood that they're having. But again, that comes with other challenges.
Mm.
But overall, it's just the generation that's different. But yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned your mother before, and I don't know how comfortable you are chatting about this, but I did read about you and about your mom that she was a child bride in Nigeria. Can you explain to people listening that about what that means and maybe how your mother's experience affected who you are today?
Absolutely. So I think she was not up to 15 when made to she was forced into, I was just what forced into marriage, because she had wanted to go to school. She was a very bright woman and she was very athletic, so she enjoyed being in school.
Mm.
However, she couldn't be in school because her father wanted something different for her. And again, if you're coming from a very cultural background as ours, where we hold our parents in high esteem, sometimes you couldn't argue, especially when the man she was getting married to, my father, had promised she would continue her education in his house, of
Okay.
course. And again, he lived up to the promise, right? And then she went back to school, but again, after about a year, she got pregnant with me, and then that was the end of schooling for her.
Mm.
She couldn't complete her education because, again, one of those reasons where poverty plays a huge factor in the, I like to use the word, destinies of humans, right? When you're forced to take decisions that are detrimental to other humans, but because at that time it was just the only choice that they had, because if they had money, if they had the opportunities, or the means, maybe she would have stayed home and then she would have become who she was meant to be. But again, those are things that we don't have control over. But as she grew up, she always wanted to go back to school. So she didn't go back to school until I had my youngest child in 2010.
Oh, wow.
Because she had it on her bucket list.
Oh, nice.
To complete at least her primary education. I'm not talking about high school. This is like elementary. So because she had it on her bucket list to complete her elementary education, she persevered. And in 2010, when I had my youngest child, she graduated from the program. I was super proud of her, and so her story inspired me, to create Kaima Designs as well, because she was a living example of like what poverty could do to a child who wanted to go to school. And so that's an example of where, because the parents didn't have the means to support the children, it was easier to do other things in that case. And so every time I thought about my mom, I'm like, if I could do something different for another girl, she shouldn't end up as a child bride. And so even with Kaima Designs, we do beyond the uniform donation. Sometimes I reach out to individuals and we do if you go to the Kaima Designs page, I reach out to individuals to support a girl child's tuition. And I have two amazing supporters right now who are providing tuition and uniform for two girls I don't even know.
Wow.
And so what it is, and these two girls have their stories. One of them is from a background where she's an orphan who's been raised by her grandmother. And then on the day she was supposed to leave school, the school proprietor saw her and then requested they left her in school, that the school would cover the tuition. And then they reached out to me, okay, we know you have this program. Is there a way you could support this girl's tuition? Because if she leaves school, we knew she was going to get married. And so she reminded me of my mom. And then there was another girl. And so I had to reach out to two individuals. Are like, well, I have a case in my hand. Would you be able to support these two girls for me? And then they did. And then today, they're sponsoring the girls' education for the second year.
Wow.
And these are girls I've not even met. But their story resonates with my mom's story. And so these are things that I don't have to be in Nigeria to do what I need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even have to know them. The thing is that once there is a need, once there's a gap, we just have to find a way to fill that gap. And I'll be very honest, it doesn't cost an arm and a leg to do that. And it just costs about $110 to sponsor a girl for 1 year.
Really?
And so this is something, for just a winter jacket or something, you sponsored a girl in that school. And so I'm like, why can't I get more people to do this? But again, I think sometimes I don't do a good job of promoting and advertising that. And then I just get busy with other things. But yes, so my mom's story inspired my business and then continues to inspire. And that was why when she passed on last August, my world was shattered, because I was looking forward to bringing her over to come and see how Kaima Design has moved on to be part of United Colors of Fashion, and how her story. And I wanted her to get a chance to meet these girls, but she never did, because I wanted her to see what, as you would say, younger me.
Yeah.
But she never got a chance to do that. And so, it's life. And yes, but I wanted to continue with that legacy for as long as I live, as long as Kaima Designs exists.
That's a very emotional story. Sorry. That is a beautiful legacy that you're leaving behind for your mom. And I'm so thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Quite beautiful. And to know that, we were talking earlier about how the hoodie is $50, or just spend $50 at Kaima Designs, and you're supporting girls' education. But to know that it's $110, a year to support a girl to go to school, that's nothing. People are struggling financially nowadays more than ever, but I think in the grand scheme of things, that's it. That's not buying a pair of sneakers once a month sort of exactly. Thing, right? So now that I know more about you, and and learning about you even before we talked, I'm really not surprised that you were recognized as one of the most inspiring immigrants in Atlantic Canada in 2023. I think it was well deserved. You're really an inspiration to the community in Atlantic Canada, not just St. John. How did it feel to be recognized in that moment?
Well, it wasn't something I expected, right? But it was truly humbling because what it meant to me was that someone out there was watching all along, right? And then someone who thought I deserved the recognition put my name forward. So in this case, I was fortunate to meet the two people, at least two of those who nominated me, and they're two great friends who've become mentors, and they've been part of the women's program. So I think they would have I think they recognized me based on my work at Prude because they saw what I was doing or what I'm doing with the women at Prude Inc. And some of them have become they were guest speakers and become mentors to some of these women. So it's like it's a community of women supporting women. So when they saw that opportunity, I think they felt it was an opportunity to put my name forward, and I'm truly grateful. However, on the other side, what it means again is like more responsibility because now if you've been recognized for something,
and you're like, dang it, I wanted the weekend off. Now I've got to do more.
So now, because every recognition is a ticket to like, you know what, go do some more work. Yeah. Because you're not going to rest on the hours. I'm like, yeah, now we've done it. Now we can go to bed. No, because if one person, two persons were watching and they did that, then it means more other people are watching. And so we just want to be able to continue with the legacy that we're doing. So, but again, at the end of the day, like I said, as during the acceptance speech, it's not more about the awardees, but those who took the time to recommend or to nominate. I think they are the true heroes because a lot of people die, without ever being appreciated for the things they've done. And then they ended up in their lives feeling like failures, not because they were failures, but because they were surrounded by people who never recognized the impact of what they did. And they did it until their very end, and yet they never got that recognition. And so it can be very painful to do so much, not because we're expecting anything in return, but it just feels good to know that the impact you're creating in the community is recognized and appreciated, and so that's why for me it was truly humbling, and it made such a huge impression on my life because someone thought I was doing something good that was worth mentioning.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you to everyone joining us today for this episode of Our Guest Is. If you don't want to miss the next episode, make sure you subscribe. You can find us on myeastcoastexperience.com, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and YouTube. Plus, don't forget you can follow My East Coast Experience on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. I'm Natalie Fournier. Thanks again, and hope you join us for our next episode.